Hi everyone. Моя презентация тоже будет на английский. I'm going to talk about ways you can use your contact hours as a continuous professional development tool, because I think that fortunately our students' learning time over with our learning time. All right. So my name is Yulia Kumichova. You might know me because I have a blog on Instagram and I blog about teaching English. I've been blogging for about 2 years, and since last year I've been a self-employed teacher. I now teach exclusively teachers, and I also consult other teachers. And because my blog is about English language teaching, I mostly communicate with colleagues, with wonderful, great teachers. And one of the most is this one. The question is, how can I advance my professional development? And whenever people ask me this question, they usually have two paths in mind. The first one is teaching skills and teaching knowledge, and they think about exams such as TKT, CELTA, or Delta. And the other path to take is language exams such as FIRST, Advanced, and Proficiency. So these are usual trajectories for professional development. By no means am I implying that you shouldn't take any of these. I think they're very helpful, and they have proven to be super effective in my personal experience. But I think we tend to overlook one very important tool of professional development, which is using our contact hours that we spend giving instructions to our students. And I believe this is an amazing tool for many different reasons. Let me name a few. So the first reason, the most obvious reason, is that teaching our students is a very practical thing. We all are practitioners, and sometimes there are amazing courses or webinars or seminars which lack practical element. You don't have an opportunity to put this all into practice. And I personally believe that it doesn't really matter how much books you've read or how many seminars you've attended unless you put it into practice. Again, a disclaimer here. I think that you should take courses and study for exams and attend webinars and seminars. But the most important thing is taking whatever knowledge you have acquired and putting it into practice. Second of all, why using classroom time is an awesome CPD tool. The second reason is that we get to practice with our students. Even if you take courses such as CELTA or Delta Module 2, where you have observed teaching practices, you usually teach people you don't know. So they assemble a bunch of students whom you are very unlikely to see once you finish the course. And you know that our students are unique individuals. They all have their own learning needs and goals and aims. And it's our top priority to make sure that we tailor our lessons to their needs and their learning preferences. Another thing to bear in mind is that our declared beliefs are sometimes very different from our actual teaching practices. What I mean is that you may think, you may be fascinated by, let's say, lexical approach, but it's very hard to implement it in practice. That's why it's very important for us to be critical of what we do when we have our classes. And last but not least, using classroom time is a free CPD tool. You don't need to pay anyone. It's very convenient. You can do it anytime, and it is easy. You feel at ease because you can do it all by yourself. You don't need to invite anyone. You may, but you just do it within the comfort of your own classroom, which is really, really cool. Whenever I talk about using classroom time, it's all about planning something, putting it into practice, and then reflecting on that. So it all boils down to reflection. But there are several steps that you can take which can bring you there and let you achieve this very goal. I'm going to guide you through these steps, giving more information about things that you can do at every stage. So the first step is try to identify what area you want to focus on as a teacher. What do you think will help you to develop and grow professionally? Try to make it specific. For example, I might feel that I need to improve my instructions. A common problem of mine is that I speak very fast. I find it difficult to grade my language, or maybe I bombard my students with the whole set of instructions instead of breaking it down into manageable pieces. So I often repeat my instructions several times, or maybe my students fail to understand them from the first time, or maybe I end up using language 1, which is not preferable for some. So this could be an area for me to work on and develop. Another potential example could be that I have just learned about a new approach to teaching writing, and I want to put it to test. So I want to try process writing with my FC students. Why not? That could be an area for me to grow and develop. Alternatively, let's imagine that I'm teaching teenagers, and my teenagers seem to be a little bit demotivated I don't know what it could be caused by. Maybe it's just spring, and they just want to have a break, and things happen. So I have a theory which I'm going to put into practice. I'm going to do my own classroom research. I'm going to use some authentic text-based materials and see if it's going to engage my students first. So the area that I'm going to be developing in is creating materials based on authentic materials. So that could be a thing. Whenever you are identifying an area you want to focus on, make sure that your goals and aims are smart. So they are specific, you narrow them down, they're measurable, there is a way for you to measure your progress and see how far you have gone. They're attainable, realistic. Don't set yourself a goal of reinventing yourself as a teacher in just 2 weeks. Probably it's going to be too much of a stretch. Trying to make your goals time-bound. Give yourself a clear deadline, a certain date by which you want to see some progress or some development. I usually give myself a month or two when I have some specific goal in mind. So having done that, we are now going to do the next step, which is identifying what resources are available. I'm sure that all people listening are avid fans of professional development. That is the reason why you are here and listening to my talk today. I just wanted to remind you of a couple of things that you can use, some of the resources available. So there are a lot of free webinars and courses online. They are mostly conducted by publishing houses. There are free courses on Future Learn and British Council, which is cool. Secondly, we always talk about how important is it to read literature and articles. And I think that we sometimes tend to overlook the importance of articles. There are a lot of great professional magazines and journals, such as Modern English Teacher, English Teaching Professional. The best thing about them is that articles which are published there have been submitted by teachers like you and me. So it means that they may offer an insight into how a real teacher, a practitioner, has dealt with a certain problem. Chances are you're going to find this experience very relatable. Of course, you may use ELT blogs. There are plenty, not only on Instagram, you can find them online. Clearly, there are some ELT courses and conferences, wonderful conferences that you can choose from, online, offline conferences. It doesn't really matter. There are so many. It's awesome. And last but not least, you can use your colleagues as a resource available. What I mean is that imagine problem. Let's say that you're teaching a mixed ability group and you find it difficult to diversify the tasks that you're going to give to your students. You may come up to a more experienced colleague of yours and ask them whether they have any experience. Maybe they have experienced it firsthand, or maybe they know a resource to look into. Maybe there is an article that they saw online. So my algorithm here, imagine that, okay, let's continue with mixed ability groups. Let's say that I have this problem and I want to develop in this area of teaching. So my first step is going to be looking for some webinars and courses online, then looking for some books and articles. So probably mixed ability. I know there are some books about this topic. Maybe there will be a chapter or two in books about classroom management. I'm going to look for some articles online. I'm sure there will be a plenty. I'm going to look through the blogs of my favorite ELT bloggers and see whether they address this issue. I'm going to see if there is a conference or a webinar for me to attend, and I will ask someone I trust. So, and try to assemble the whole array of resources. Which brings us to our third step. Having done that, we are now going to think how to apply all of that into practice. As I have said before, I think it's truly tremendously important to put it all into practice. It doesn't matter how many books you've read or webinars you watched, unless you bring it into the classroom. It starts living the moment you bring it into your class to your students. So how you can do that? Okay, number one, you need to identify your aims when you are planning your lessons. It could be your personal aims, your professional aims, or main aims of the lesson. Depending on the aims that you have specified, plan accordingly. Include new activities into your plan. Or maybe, let's say that you have learned about a new approach and you want to try it out. Build your lesson plan around this new approach. Why not? Totally, perfectly fine. If there is something potentially difficult, let's say I want to improve the way I give instructions, I'm going to script whatever I'm going to say in my lesson plan. It's going to be an effective way, and my planning will change because of that. I'm going to script whatever I'm going to say and see how closely I follow the script overall. And one of the most important thing that you need to bear in mind is that you need to prepare a plan B, a backup plan. If everything fires back at you, you need to be prepared. You need to plan anticipated problems and anticipated solutions. It is one of the potential pitfalls that you are likely to see, which is whenever you're putting new skills into practice, you may stumble into some problems. Doesn't work out right away. This is something that we tell our students, but we tend to forget ourselves. A mistake, it's always the end of the world. We feel like we need to quit teaching right away. It's fine. The fact that you're making a mistake signals that you're learning something new. So don't worry if something doesn't work the way you intended right away. It's fine. Give yourself some time. It might be beneficial to think if the thing that happened is a critical learning incident. What is a critical learning incident if you think about it? Critical learning incident is something that has a further potential for learning. So it is a situation which may bear fruit in the long run in terms of your professional and personal growth as a teacher. For example, let's imagine that you wanted to work more on pair work with your students. And when you were grouping students, one of them said, I don't want to work with them. Yeah, I hate working in pairs. Why do I need to listen to someone making mistakes over and over? This is a critical learning incident because it's affecting your teaching and it's affecting your learning. It's very important to differentiate between a critical learning incident and just a thing that went wrong. Again, it's fine. If something doesn't work according to the plan, it is totally okay. Maybe if it doesn't have a further potential, just ignore it. I mean, it's not a big deal. Things happen. But if it has potential, growth potential, ask yourself a couple of questions. For example, what might have caused it? For example, if your student refuses to work in pairs, maybe it signals that there is a core belief that your student sticks to about the way languages should be learned. Unless you address this issue directly, it's going to affect your learning. Maybe it may mean that you didn't group your students the way which would be acceptable. Maybe they don't get on well. I mean, those two students that you were putting, maybe it's because they don't understand the rationale behind it. So your task as a teacher is to explain why you want them to work in pairs. So again, what might have caused it? Why is this important? What might it mean in the long run? And one of the most important questions is, how would you react if this happens again? Let's say that you teach a different class and then you run into the same problem. Is your reaction going to be any different? What would you change? Why? So these are the questions for you to bear in mind if something goes wrong, which is, again, totally okay. Having planned our wonderful lesson, now we have approached an exciting step, which is recording your lesson. We now are blessed with opportunities to record our lessons, with many of us teaching online. But before you record, you need to make sure that you understand what you are recording. Are you recording the whole lesson, or are you recording a part of the lesson? If you are recording the whole lesson, you may later rewatch that and see how you pace your lesson, how your activities are structured, or whether you managed to establish a good rapport in your classroom. If you're recording a part of the lesson, you may focus on something more specific. Let's say that you are trying out a new activity you've never tried before, and it is essential for you to record that very part of the lesson. Or alternatively, you may record the way you give instructions and then analyze your teacher talk. Whether you use too difficult of language when you are giving instructions, you don't grade it depending on their students, on your students. Or alternatively, you may focus on one particular student who is making great progress, and you just want to see what you do as a teacher to contribute to their success. Or maybe there is a student who tends to be misbehaving. You can focus on them and see how you deal with little issues coming up here and there. So depending on the amount of the lesson that you're going to record, you're going to specify your reflection needs, so to say. If you think about recording your lessons, there are a couple of things that you need to bear in mind. The first one is that you may let your students know that the lesson is being recorded and explain why you do that. Tell them that you do that so as to control yourself, to see yourself develop. Students usually like that. When they understand that you prioritize professional development and you explain the reason behind it, they always go, oh yes, it's very important for teachers to develop. We appreciate it. Thank you, dear teacher. Alternatively, you may keep it secret. Don't tell your students you are recording if you think it's going to be affecting their performance. In my personal experience, when you're recording a lesson, they are usually camera shy for, let's say, 5 minutes, and then they forget about it. So it's very easy to record it online, right? Because we have Zoom, we have Loom, we have Skype, where you have screen recording function. But if you have a luxury of teaching face-to-face, I have a life hack for you. So what you may do, bring your laptop into your classroom, start a Zoom meeting, hit record, and while you're doing that, you may put up a new window over your Zoom window. Let's say you open up a Word document. So your students will see a Word document on the screen, and you can place your laptop in such a way that it is facing you only, so they wouldn't have any doubts or any sneaking suspicions about you recording the lesson. You there's one legal thing that you need to bear in mind when it comes to recording and sharing videos. You might need to ask your students to fill in a video consent form. You can find them online, but I think it would depend on the legislation in this specific area. When I used to work in a language school, we had to ask all of our clients fill in this video consent form because we were sharing some of that on our social media. So here's just a thing for you to look into. If you are watching it yourself, I mean, if you are doing it for your personal professional development purposes, I don't really think that you need to ask them, I mean, to fill in a legal video consent form. All right, having recorded the lesson, it's time to reflect. And this is the most crucial part of all this thing. This is how I usually reflect. I use Notion. Notion is all-in-one workspace. So it's a combination of Google Drive, Google Docs, Trello, you name it. It has it all. So the reason why I have chosen Notion is because I plan my lessons using Notions. I create 2 separate databases with my lesson plans and my lesson reflections. So what I do is that I can combine these, I can connect these databases, and I can jump between my lesson plans and my reflections. This is what my reflection looks like. The questions that I ask myself after a lesson that I have taught are based on the self-reflection questionnaire that we had to submit during my CELTA course. I took CELTA in 2017, and after each lesson, you need to answer a couple of questions. So write self-evaluation, so to say. What I like about this form is that not only does it focus on the lesson, it lets you think about the lesson plan. And the second question here, what is the element of the lesson you were happiest with? How did you feel? What did you feel worked best, and why? I think these are very important because we tend to be too harsh on ourselves. I can tell you that I am now communicating with teachers exclusively, and they tend to be so harsh on themselves. So celebrate little victories. I will talk about that later. When it comes to writing a formal reflection of the lesson, I don't do that all the time. It's something that I do sometimes when I feel like this is something that I want to focus. A quicker way to reflect on your lessons is recording a voice message to yourself. I use Telegram to do that because you can speed the videos up. When you're busy, when you're running from one class to another, you just pull your mobile phone and then you record a voice message talking to yourself about how the lesson went. Then you can re-listen to that and then come back to that and see how far you have progressed. So this is a thing for you to look into. You may use not just Telegram, but any messenger that lets you send the messages to yourself. Use that. And last but not least, if you are not as tech savvy or you are sick and tired of technology, you can simply take notes, especially if you plan your lessons using, like the analog piece of paper and notebook. Use your notes, like written notes, and record it all down. The reason why I insist on you recording something is that it's very hard to track your progress unless you do. You may think, okay, I will remember how I felt after having taught this very lesson. Trust me, your memory is going to be wiped of this lesson in the span of 2 days. And it's very hard to track your progress unless there is something for you to go back. Make sure that there is a way you are documenting your process as you go. One more thing that I would like to highlight when we talk about reflecting on your lessons. As I have told you, I know that teachers tend to be very critical of themselves. And there is another thing to bear in mind, which is called negative bias. Our brains are... It's easier to think about things the brain is programmed to do. That's why it is very important to celebrate small victories. Even if you disastrous lesson, which happens, I don't know, probably never, try to find something that you love about it. What did you do to contribute to the lesson success? I know it's very tempting to criticize yourself, to do a hatchet job on your lesson. And the first couple of times that you will watch your lessons record, I think you are likely to be overly critical of yourself. But if you think about it, it makes more sense to look at the things that worked right and try to take this knowledge and implement it in other lessons rather than focusing on something that went wrong. Trying to focus on things that worked, trying to analyze what made them work, which is a great strategy to adhere to. The next step that you may take is finding a study buddy or a mentor. So find someone that you personally know and you trust to help yourself keep accountable, because it's very easy to forget about your plan. But if you have a person who, checks in on you and asks, how's your plan going? How are you feeling about this or that? So whenever you have someone who motivates you, it's an amazing way to keep yourself accountable and to stick to the plan that you have set out on achieving. Make sure that your mentor or your study buddy are aware of your aims that you have set in step 1, because this is what may help you leverage the true potential of this collaboration. When you work on your professional development goals, make sure that your plan as you go. Make sure that you revisit some of the aims that you highlighted. Maybe something changes and you want to change the way you teach. I don't know, maybe your priorities have changed, or maybe the things that you have highlighted in the beginning are no longer relevant, or maybe you have put them to test and you now understand that maybe it's not going to be something that I'm going to benefit from the most. So make sure that you revisit your action plan and change it according to your current needs. And again, don't forget to celebrate your progress. Having recorded that, it's very easy to go back and, let's say, re-listen to your first voice message and then see how you felt about that very lesson and how you feel about the lesson today. Celebrate little victories. You are learning. There is a learning curve. There are ups and downs. Of course, there will be some things that won't work from the first time, but still, celebrate little teeny tiny baby steps as you go. And then last but not least, it's getting your lessons observed. I know that a lot of teachers are not particularly big on getting their lessons observed because it's very stressful. You have someone coming into your classroom, examining every move you take, and you're afraid that whatever you're doing wouldn't stand up to scrutiny. It is very stressful, I get it. But, you need to think about lesson observations and people who come into your lessons. You need to see them not as someone who is trying to police you, not as someone who tries to punish, criticize you. No, but someone who wants to help you. Because if you get a new pair of eyes to see yourself in a new light and a new perspective, it's going to be very illuminating and insightful. You may notice things that you were unaware of. I remember that one of the things that surprised me when I was doing my CELTA was that there were things that I would have never thought I was doing wrong unless my tutor pointed them to me. And of course, I might have taken some offense and said, oh, you shouldn't criticize me. This is how I do that, or stuff like that. But I was so grateful. See it as an opportunity to grow rather than, them trying to criticize you. That being said, I know that there are good observers and not so good observers. Not so good observers, they look for mistakes when you are watching and observing your lessons. They are looking for things that they would have done differently. And very often during your post-lesson discussions, you hear something like, oh, you shouldn't do that. You should do this. When I did this with my students, it worked. So a good lesson observer looks at your lesson the way it is. They look at your lesson trying to see if effective learning takes place. If you manage to achieve your main aim, or at least get closer to your main aim. Because whenever we are observing a lesson, I have experienced it myself. Working as an assistant director of studies, I have observed a lot of lessons, and now consulting other teachers, this is something that I have to deal with. When teachers send me a recording of their class, I know very little of teachers' belief, of their own learning experience, of their relationship with the students, of their students' motivation, learning preferences, and stuff like that. So I cannot impose my teaching beliefs onto this teacher and this very class. So what I need to do is to take off my teaching hat and try to see the lesson the way it is. Try to see the lesson and analyze whether effective learning is taking place, whether students are actually learning something. So these are all of the things that I wanted to remind you of. And now, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. I would be happy to reply to any of them. I am seeing some comments that some of you say that, yes, recording helps. It really works, and I think it does work. Thank you, Irina, for your comment. Is that it is true that sometimes it's hard to see yourself in recording, but it's very effective. Didn't get it. Is it possible to send you CPD with lesson observation? Well, yes, it's one of the things that I do. Sometimes we can arrange a consultation, and something that I do. So another prefer recording parts, you can focus on stages and discipline, which is amazing. By the way, Yulia, thank you for your comment. It's cool that you can focus on discipline when you're teaching. It's very hard to see your students because you always think about the ways, the way you structure the lesson. So you think about the next activity, you have the next activity in mind. And when you rewatch the lesson, you don't need to think about what goes next. You just watch the lesson the way it is. So yes, that's true. Thank you very much. Someone also thank you.
Юлия, спасибо вам большое за замечательный доклад. Очень как-то insightful.
Спасибо большое, я очень рада.